We'll look for your approval at the regular meeting.
Thanks, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa about Mike's appointment?
Great.
No, and I think it's great.
Glad they found someone from US Bank.
Yes, I think it's wonderful to have the consistency with US Bank, so that's wonderful. Perfect, so we'll see that on consent, and then, Mike, let's just double check. If you've got some questions, Mike, I'm gonna ask that you maybe text one of the staff members and we'll make sure we get it. We'll get connected with you. So Mike, I'm assuming you're okay with our consent agenda item, but you have a second bite at that apple. You are wonderful, Mike. Great. All right, now we're going to move on to an update on resuming live performances at the Lone Tree Arts Center. And Lisa, we have to congratulate you on being, if not the first, one of the first to actually accomplish that in the state of Colorado. So love to hear more.
Thank you. It was very exciting to be able to do that. And it really was the result of 7 or 8 weeks of advanced planning by our entire staff. You know, I think at the last study session we shared with you the Know Before You Go video, which demonstrated the meticulous care we've given to every aspect of people entering our building and feeling safe. Wouldn't you know it, it rained on both nights for our outdoor concerts. And that's all right because we were prepared, because we're always prepared for things like that. We had 150 attendees. We had about 75% capacity at those very first concerts, which I think is really, really good because we were really asking people to take a risk and take a chance when they hadn't been anywhere other than Safeway or Costco, you know, for many months.
The liquor store, Lisa, let's be real.
and Lucas Liquors, that's right. So many familiar Lone Tree faces who came in our doors and just were thrilled to be able to be back, and were so generous and kind as they were coming in. If we can go to the next slide, I'll show you a picture. This is what it looked like when we had to go inside. There was Mary Louise Lee and her band on stage. I believe the backup singers were 5 feet 5 inches apart from each other, maybe a little more, but some of the musicians wore masks. The first row of seats was 25 feet away from the performer. And something I know is always very important to City Council, we made money on these concerts, and so that's a really good thing. Before each of the shows, both Friday night and Saturday night, I made a curtain speech welcoming everyone back, and I thought it was important to acknowledge what special moment it was to thank people for believing in us and for continuing their support, and just in a gentle way to remind them of the protocols and why it was so important that they continue to help us keep each other safe. And I got a lot of great comments in response to that. So I think that that was a good decision on our part. In the next slide, you're going to see how some of this social distancing worked inside. You know, in that video we showed you, the chairs were set up in socially distanced ways, and we had tarps on the lawn, but we had to do something different inside. So we are going to be ribboning off rows as well as seats. And so this is how it worked, and it worked beautifully. No one tried to move their ribbon from place to place. And, you know, I would say that with just a couple of exceptions, people were exceptionally cooperative and not grumbly. They were very, very, very happy to be back in this building and to be experiencing a couple of really extraordinary concerts.
And live performance,
and
right?
live performance, that's what we're about. I don't know that you know that I'm the president of the Rocky Mountain Arts Consortium, which is a consortium of about 35 theaters and venues across a 5-state area, and we are the first in our consortium to be able to welcome people back into our venue. And I have just been getting calls and emails. How did you do it? What worked? What didn't? And so the City of Lone Tree, as always, is taking the lead and demonstrating how to do things right. And so I'm happy to share what we learned from them. We do have more concerts coming up. And so on the next slide, I think we've got our upcoming oh no, I wanted to show the patron feedback. Sorry, I don't have a preview slide like our Net Geo speakers. So we did immediately survey our patrons, as we always do. This was some of the feedback we got. You've done an outstanding job reopening. Thanks for getting back to the shows. Wonderful event. Keep up the good work. Stay strong. That's a really important message for our staff right now. Well done. Great performance. Safe environment. And probably the most important question, would you feel safe returning? And the next slide says to us, yes, they do, which is great. So we're really excited about that. And now the next slide will show you our upcoming concerts. In just a couple of weeks, Hazel Miller and the Collective will come Friday and Saturday night. Solex on August 28th, Set Sail Yacht Rock 29th, and then Billy McWiggin and the Downliners in mid-September. And perhaps the weather gods will favor us and we'll be able to be outside and see how our terrace plan worked. But now we know how it works inside, and so we're really excited about that. So I think it was very successful, and great. We didn't learn much new, other than it's really hard to keep people 6 feet apart during intermission. People were further apart than they normally are, so they're trying. Everyone's trying. But the mask making, I'm sorry, about 3 months late. The mask wearing was almost universal. Some people did take them off during the performance when we had asked them to leave them on, and we're working on how we will gently get them to put them back on when they're in their seats. So we were really pleased. I don't know, Councilmember Shaw, we were so grateful that you came, and I don't know if there's anything that you might want to add about the experience from a patron perspective.
I think it looked lovely. The green ribbon, I got a great photo, by the way, posted to Google, and I think it showed not only the spaces being defined, but the green was just beautiful with the stage and all of that. I think people did a really good job. I felt extremely comfortable, and I felt the only thing I need to learn is when somebody comes to the end of your row, how to get out without facing them and then letting them go in and go sit down again. It's really different. It's a kind of, I figured out after a while, but it was really nice and very well done. I felt Mary Louise Lee was spot on when she was talking about how much they miss performing and we missed seeing them. It was good to be back.
They were very grateful that we gave them the opportunity to return. So that was there were tears.
Yes.
There were tears everywhere, I think.
I had a
Jay,
question.
yeah.
I just had a question. Unfortunately, I was out of town up in the mountains in the rain up there. But at what point did you have to pivot from outside to inside? Because I know logistically that's pretty difficult to do. What point did you do that, make that proactive decision?
Typically, we say we need to make the decision by 4 o'clock on a performance day, but given all of the preparations, we decided it would have to be 2 o'clock. As is usually the case, Paul's 24 hours ahead of me, and on Thursday, he said, we're going to have to move this inside. I said, we're going to wait till tomorrow. And then I called him at noon and said, we're going to have to move this inside. So the weather forecast was pretty consistent for both days. And the issue is that if we set up on the Terrace Theater, if we set up our soundboard, all of our sound equipment, and we have sound check, and then it rains, we could not move
Right.
everybody inside.
Right.
So it really is about that critical period when we're setting everything up and getting ready to do the sound check. So if there's any chance of rain in that period, we have to move inside.
Oh, great job.
And I would say also, it was wonderful. There was an email, there was a phone call, there was another email, so that everyone was
Communication.
prepared that it was inside. And again, another opportunity, if you weren't comfortable inside, just give us a call and we'll take care of it.
And we had a couple of patrons, very dear patrons of ours who were not comfortable coming inside, and we were happy to refund their money. And we also, because we knew we were moving inside, people who had lawn seats, we simply assigned them seats in the theater, so everyone knew exactly where they were going when they came in.
It's great.
It was great.
Great. Kath, you have anything other than I know you
No,
want to say
just glad-
kudos?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
glad it went well, and that I think people are so desperate for some normalcy right now that the fact that you can be that is just awesome. So thanks for all
As
your
much
work
as we
there.
can, we
Yeah.
want to be able to do it.
So Mike, do you have anything you want to add? I feel like I'm talking to the universe here.
No, congratulations on reopening the theater. I know for the patrons, it was a breath of fresh air to be able to get out and to enjoy arts again. So nice job, well done.
Thank you.
And I think on behalf of council, we want to extend to you for your great leadership and having it happen, and to the entire team at the Arts Center, just our deepest gratitude and thanks and appreciation for actually not only being a leader in getting it done in the industry, but just for the good work that and the thought behind all of it. I think it is, as I went through the details of what you were doing to try and make sure everyone was safe, it was very overwhelming. And so I really appreciate the attention to detail that was brought to this and to make it as that positive experience that it was. And I want to give you another chance to brag about another wonderful initiative that you guys are undertaking to set the stage. And it seems like you're getting closer and closer to that 180,000 goal. So can you give us just a little short update on where you and the team at the Arts Center are with that?
Of course. We typically like to update you on a Thursday, and we are hoping that in a couple of days we can give you the best news possible. We are very, very close. We have had significant gifts. People are increasing their giving. People who've never given before have given to the Arts Center because they know how important it is to them that this be part of their community. We are within spitting distance.
Wonderful.
Is that close enough?
That's close enough.
Okay.
That is close enough. And I want to say I've received wonderful feedback about the lovely letters that you and Robin are sending to folks who have donated to the campaign. So that is being very well received by everyone that you're reaching out to. So thanks for that attention to detail on that too. So we appreciate everything you guys are doing in very difficult and challenging times. So
Thank you.
tell the team, thank you,
Thank you.
please. Okay. All right, now we are moving on to the Ridgegate Parks and Open Space Property Transfer. I like all of these, right? We've got arts, good news, we're getting opens, we're getting parks, open space. All right, Austin, please update us. And I know that Keith Steinman, president of Rampart Range Metro District, will be joining remotely.
Yes, Keith is on. We have a slot for him at the end of the presentation
Perfect.
for him to give remarks. And yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us bring this to you this evening. Really excited about this project. It's been in the making for quite a long time, and we're finally ready to push it over the finish line. So this evening, we wanted to give you some background about what the project is, what the city's getting, and how the partnership looks between us, Rampart Range, and South Suburban. And then at the next council meeting on August 18th, we're going to bring this back to you for formal action. So go ahead and go to the next slide. First, I just wanted to kind of give us a reminder about our strategic plan and our vision for the community, and why I think this project in particular fits into our vision so well. Vibrant public spaces, beautiful natural environment, great neighborhoods. These are all things that we're striving for as a city, and I think this project, bringing these properties into the city's portfolio and preserving them, while also actively being engaged with our partners, I think this really helps us fulfill that vision. So the project itself, what we're doing is essentially transferring property from the Rampart Range Metropolitan District and Ridgegate Investments to the city. This is probably going to be the largest transfer in the city's history so far, at 392 acres, almost 400 acres of space. About 374 acres of that is open space, 18 acres is developed parks. Those include Lincoln Commons Park, so right across from Charles Schwab, that open space. Don Bounds Park, which is also part of that area. Promenade Park, directly up the street from the Arts Center. Belvedere Park, which is probably the largest developed park of the bunch. And then the Ridgegate and Crossington open space area, which we'll go to in the next slide. Will show that it really borders a lot of different stuff in the city, and we're really glad that that is being able to come to our open space portfolio. And then finally, the parks are going to be managed by South Suburban Parks and Rec District. So this again is really a great partnership between us and the district, for them to be able to provide programming and maintenance to these properties while the city maintains ownership. So these are those properties again on a map. You can see they border Bluffs Regional Park, Prairie Sky Park. The Lone Tree Rec Center plays into that whole corridor of open space along the Willow Creek Trail area. And then also the immediate adjacency to I-25, looking across the street at Schweiger Ranch, the Future Regional Park. We think this is a really, really great property. The East-West Trail runs through there, and the future connections into Parker. Those are already existing assets in the area, and we're really excited that those get to continue to be preserved under the city's ownership. This is just an aerial of the area, and hopefully you're all familiar with it. And now I'm just going to go through each of the properties just to remind you of what we're actually looking at. So here we have Don Bounds Park and the Lincoln Commons open space. Again, the Lincoln Avenue pedestrian bridge plays directly into this area. The Willow Creek Trail runs through it. And if you're ever out there, particularly, hopefully when things open back up during lunchtime, you'll see Charles Schwab employees, Skyridge Medical Center employees, folks in the neighborhood. This is a really, really active area. So we're really excited to have that under the city's portfolio. Promenade Park, just down the street, the continuation of the Willow Creek Trail. This park has a small amphitheater area, a playground area, and a lot of picnic space. So it's a small park, but there's a lot of stuff packed into it. And then Belvedere Park, the next one in the chain. This is, again, the largest developed park. So lots of large grassy fields, play structures, picnic areas. It's also active a lot. So the community's definitely loved it a bit. And then finally, the open space. Really, I think some of the best views of Metro Denver that you can get are up on the bluffs. And this, again, connects directly into the Bluffs open space network. There's already trails that run through there. We mentioned the East-West Trail. Lonehenge is another landmark that's in the area that we'll be inheriting, if you're familiar with that rock sculpture area. So we're really excited to bring that into the city's portfolio. Let's talk a little bit about this partnership. So while it is a property transfer and the city's going to be maintaining ownership, a lot of other responsibilities are going to come from our partners, and we're really, really grateful for them and what they're providing to the community. So South Suburban is going to become the primary maintenance proponent of these properties, as well as the primary programmer. So look for South Suburban programming likely to take place in the parks and the open space. And the Rampart Range Metropolitan District, while they're giving us the land, they are still going to be maintaining some maintenance responsibilities. Primarily the key infrastructure that's needed for the surrounding development that is within these properties, they're going to continue to maintain those areas. So these are things like drainage structures, detention ponds, retaining walls, a lot of things that the surrounding development benefits from, they're going to continue to maintain. So some of the project goals were to protect and preserve open space. This is always slated to be open space. However, having it under the city's portfolio, we're really excited for what that means for future recreational enhancements, and also, again, the ability to promote those existing recreational amenities that are already there. It's going to be keeping a lot more South Suburban tax dollars within the Ridgegate area. So we're really excited to see that. And of course, South Suburban provides a level of operational expertise with parks that I'm really happy that they're going to be the ones that are going to be overseeing those areas. And again, we mentioned the programming. And then Rampart Range will be able to direct funds to other areas of the district for other priorities. Some other benefits that we're really excited about. So there are some XL power lines that run up on top of the bluffs that you can see from town. And we're not talking about the major lines that run east-west on the city's border. There's actually a spur that runs to the north. And once it gets to the apex of the bluffs, that's when it goes underground. So you see these poles from a lot of places all over the city. So this is actually going to allow us to tap into some XL undergrounding funds. Because this land will be under city ownership, we're going to be able to tap into those funds and actually underground those power lines using the funds that are earmarked to only be used for undergrounding, which we're really lucky in the city of Lone Tree. We don't have a lot of above ground power lines to underground, and so this is a project that will allow us to put those funds to use. Again, we mentioned South Suburban providing expertise, and it also will help reduce a little bit of confusion about who does what where. Oh yeah, you have a maintenance, so if we're talking to a resident, they have a maintenance concern in a park. It's just South Suburban. That's who they should go to. And so this is going to really help reduce a lot of that confusion. The project team. So I wanted to put up a lot of names here. I'm not going to go through them all one by one, but I just want to illustrate how big of an effort this has been over the years, even stretching back to Steve Hebert and Lisa Albers from our team, who they're no longer with the city, but I need to send them a gift card or something after this because they put in a lot of work to make this happen. It's definitely been a joint effort by a lot of people. And so I'm really appreciative to everyone and more on this slide. So thank you. Next, I want to talk a little bit about how this responds to community priorities. So within our community survey, parks, ball fields, and playgrounds and open space rank very highly with our residents as far as areas that they want the city to pay attention to, between 81 and 89% for those areas. And so us investing and taking on these properties for that long-term preservation is going to be something that really responds to this. And also through some visitation estimates that we have, we think about 60,000 people are utilizing these spaces on over the past 12 months on an annual basis. So they're definitely very loved spaces by the community already. Rampart Range has done a really good job of building the neighborhood and everything that connects into these parks and making them the place people want to be. And so we're really excited to be able to have that as part of the city. Okay, now here's the fun stuff, the documents and all the logistics. It's a little more complicated than just signing over one deed. So we'll go ahead and get into it. There's actually 5 sets of documents, not just 5 documents, 5 sets of documents that are actually going to allow us to bring this to fruition. And again, this is in part just because it's a very large transfer, in part also because of all those maintenance responsibilities and the way that we're divvying those up. We want to make sure that we've checked all of our boxes. So the overarching document here is the Rampart Range Metropolitan District to the City of Lone Tree, the deed documents. This is what's actually going to make it official. Rampart Range Metro District did have a punch list, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but essentially it's a list of improvements that needed to be made before the city took on the properties. Rampart Range Metro District and the City of Lone Tree, we have a series of 4 easement and maintenance agreements, which will, after they give us the properties, it'll give them permission to come back onto the properties for the maintenance of the retaining walls and the drainage areas. And then South Suburban Parks and Rec District and Rampart Range have a separate IGA between the 2 of them, which will help with some maintenance sharing and some utility paybacks, which we'll get into in a minute. And then this one's already done. It's already checked off the list, so I'm very grateful for that. The South Suburban Parks and Rec District and City of Lone Tree Master IGA, which was adopted in 2018, already addressed the property transfer. So we don't need to retouch that document again. So the bargain and sale deeds. So this is what actually formalizes the transfer.
It is a bargain, $25.
It is a bargain.
Right.
Oh yeah. Very excited about that. So it's a bargain and a little bit of a sale. So essentially, it's what formalizes the transfer. It includes all the properties, including some that Ridgegate Investments had ownership of. They actually transferred those to Rampart Range Metro District first before they came to the city. So that kind of streamlines it a little bit. And then one of the important things on here is it does preserve easements on the open space for future development up in the bluff area. And so what these easements will do is it'll allow Rampart Range Metro District or Ridgegate to go in and construct utility lines and roadways and things of that nature, so that the development that we've already known was coming to that area will be able to function. There are some asterisks on that, so all the utilities will be required to be undergrounded, and they can only serve that development area. And so to talk about that a little bit more, you'll see this. This is actually from the PDD 6th Amendment, which was last approved by Council on January 21st. But the gray area where it says future rural residential, that's the area we're looking at that'll have future development there. And you can see it's completely surrounded by the open space. And so in order for that area to be developed in the future in accordance with the PDD, there do need to be a way for roads to get there, for utilities to get up there. It is slated to allow for up to 261 homes in that area from the PDD. And next, the punch list. So this includes maintenance improvements to the park properties that need to happen before the transfer was made over, as agreed to by all three parties. Most of the work was done in Belvedere Park, understandably. It was constructed in 2008. It opened in 2008. So that was about 12 years ago. And so, there's a lot of wear and tear that comes with a well-loved space. And so Rampart Range worked really diligently, and I really appreciate their efforts to make investments in that property before it came over to the city. Next up, the easement and maintenance agreements. Again, this is what's going to allow Rampart Range Metro District and their contractors access back onto the properties for maintenance of the drainage areas, retaining walls, those sorts of things. And these documents specify in greater detail who's responsible for what. So very helpful in that sense. It also specifies some other areas where Rampart Range Metro District will be taking some special ownership of some areas. So there's some enhanced planting areas over by the Thrive Townhomes that they're going to continue to maintain. Some stone facade work on the underpasses that were just above the service level that might exist in other places. And so Rampart Range is going to continue to maintain those aspects. And it also clarifies some of South Suburban and the City of Lone Tree's responsibilities, including utilities and lighting. Which brings me to the next one, which is the IGA between South Suburban and Rampart Range. So because of the way utilities are set up in that area, they're all actually integrated. And so the utilities for the parks are the same as all of Rampart Range's other utility infrastructure, including medians and that sort of thing. And so the easiest way that was determined to take care of that is through an equation and kind of through an annual breakdown. South Suburban is just going to pay Rampart Range back for their share of the utilities and their share of the water and all of that good stuff. And so that's really what this IGA addresses. And it also specifies how they're going to be sharing a maintenance contract with Brightview. So Brightview is currently the one that maintains these parks. They're going to continue to be the one that maintains the parks. And even though Rampart Range will take care of stone facades and these little planting beds, it's all going to be done by Brightview. So it's all still going to be done by one unified entity. It's just who pays for what improvements or who pays for what maintenance. That's what gets broken down here.
Austin, what's the term of that IGA?
The term of the IGA, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Keith, I'm not sure if you're on the line and we do have a copy of it, and we can get that pulled up pretty quickly for you.
Okay.
And we'll make sure it's included in the council packet as well for the next council meeting when you go to formally look at this. And finally, we have the master IGA between City of Lone Tree and South Suburban. And this is a 2018 document that already contemplated this, so we don't need to touch it. It specifies that the improvements in the parks and open space and park infrastructure, amenities and trails, those will all be operated and maintained by South Suburban. So really grateful again for their partnership. And now we're making it official. So cruising right along. The Rampart Range Metro District Board and the South Suburban Board have already considered these items. South Suburban's board really only needed to consider the IGA. We're right now on August 4th, right here with you at the study session. And we're going to be looking to formally bring this to council for the August 18th meeting. So again, we'll make sure you have all of the actual formalized documents to look over and so that you can make an informed decision. And then if you decide to move forward with the acquisition, maintenance by South Suburban would begin on September 1st. Here's the fun part. So in celebration of 25 years, it's not a free land deal, which I think is okay. Maybe I'll just pay for this one out of pocket. But we are gonna buy these properties for $25 in celebration of the city's 25th anniversary. So very excited about that. And now, Keith, if you're on the line, I'd like to turn it over to you for some remarks.
Hey, thanks a lot, Austin, and great presentation. It's been really nice to watch you evolve yourself in these presentations. This is definitely your best. And I'd like to thank Austin and Denise Denslow from the Rampart team for their hard work getting this over the finish line and the work they did to coordinate and manage their legal and technical teams to get us over the finish line. You know, this has been an interesting process for what seemed initially like a pretty simple thing, giving land away, right? But as you always say, Mayor, the devil's in the details, and that gave rise to many legitimate issues from both sides that needed to be worked out, and they were worked out and solved by all the parties. So it was a lot of work to do that, but we're really happy that this is happening. By the way, it's not free land. It's 6 cents an acre land.
There you go.
Which please don't ever tell anyone in the development industry that we did that, because it's not a good comp to have out there, right? But you know, this 392 acres is obviously in addition to the property that we previously conveyed to the city for Prairie Sky Park. And it does include, as Austin called it, the Stonehenge or whatever it was you said, Austin, but that's actually called the Council Circle at the Bluffs. At least that's what the artist named it when we purchased it from him. So congratulations on your new art piece also on August 18th. So lastly, you know, I just want to reiterate, you know, the whole motivation for this, well, not the whole, but I think one of the major motivations was the simplification of ownership, not only for maintenance, but also for public safety purposes. I remember a couple of years ago, Denise and I had a series of meetings with Chief Wilson to talk about, you know, some of these issues that crop up about people doing things up on the bluffs and how to legitimately do enforcement, you know, given the mix of different ownership and so forth. So this will hopefully make that a lot simpler for all of you, in addition to the maintenance responsibilities and responding to your citizens about those. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but we're very pleased that we're at this point. So thank you very much to everyone involved.
Thank you, Keith, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm going to look to council to see if there are any questions on this deal. I think, Austin, you did a great job walking us through what was a very complicated. I think Kathy and I sat at a Rampart Range Metro or our you know, quarterly meetings at one point and said, well, this makes a lot of sense and let's move forward. And never did we think it's been a 4-year process, maybe. But I think you're right. I think it is a complicated issue. And I think we are very fortunate to have great partners like the Rampart Range Metro District and South Suburban Parks and Recreation District that allow us to kind of stretch our dollars and really increase the amenities offered to our residents. So Jay.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to reference that slide of everyone who was involved. It feels like forever ago when we started this discussion with Steve Hebert and our lunches with South Suburban. And so I know a lot of work went into it, and there are a lot of moving parts, but I think the consistency makes a lot of sense. I was hoping we could wrap it up last year, and it would only been $24.
Always looking for that value, Jay. We appreciate that. And I think we have to thank Linda as well, our city attorney, because you went through 5 sets of documents, and you and your team at Michelle and Associates. Yeah, we appreciate that as well. So I don't have any questions. Mike, do you have any questions?
I would just add what a tremendous effort by our partners making this happen. It has been a long process. You know, as Austin mentioned, it's historic. It's also a good buy, but it's going to be a real asset to the community and to our residents in the area, and simplifying some of the maintenance and improving the understandings on safety will go a long way towards making it a more useful property for everybody. Thanks to everybody for the hard work over a long period of time to deal with the punch list and the detailed items to make this all happen.
Great, thanks, Mike. And I think just to wrap it up, we all serve the same public, right? Rampart Range Metro District, South Suburban Parks and Recreation District, those are our constituencies, right? So I think it really, we serve them best when we collaborate and work together. And I think this is just a wonderful example of how the service to the community will be enhanced by the 3 municipal and local government entities working together to make it even better, to make our great city even better. So I want to, again, Austin, thanks. And Keith, thank you. And we please extend our gratitude to Denise Denslow as well. I know she was very involved in this process. So kudos to everybody all around. And thanks for the sweet deal on the land. Let me know if you've got anything else you want to sell us.
I think because of limited capacity and, trying to keep numbers down,
Yeah.
keep things quick, South Suburban doesn't have a speaking representative on tonight, but they are tuning in to watch right now. So thank you to South Suburban as well.
All right, and yes, and from us, from council as well. We very much appreciate your partnership in this and all the other great things that you do in our city. So thank you. Thanks for that, reminding us of that, Austin. All right, we are now moving on to proposed amendments to Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code, which governs subdivisions, and a proposed amendment to the city's landscape guidelines for public right-of-way. And Roshana Floyd is presenting to us this evening. And I keep saying that, it's not this evening quite yet.
It is.
Oh, it is. We are officially in the evening, Roshana, so yeah.
In the evening hours.
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'd love to be back in front of you to talk about something that I'm sure you find very thrilling, code.
Yeah, well,
So-
can you beat the deal Austin just brought us, $25? I mean, I think he set the bar
He
for us
set the
this
bar
evening.
really high.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely lost the gamble in the order of this
Yeah.
one, so I will learn my lesson. All right, may I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Fantastic. So the purpose of tonight is to give you a broad overview of the 2 updates that staff is currently working through. As proposed, you will see these in full, numerous pages in the following council meeting. So without further ado, the reason that we provide subdivision regulations is to avoid some of these components here. The top quote is actually from a 2014 article from the Denver Post relative to what are called zombie subdivisions. Something certainly that Lone Tree is not used to. However, the Intermountain West and Colorado specifically actually kind of established and set the bar for what these zombie subdivisions could look like. So this is why we regulate our subdivisions. Next slide, please. The importance of why we regulate these subdivisions is, frankly, relative to statute. If we actually want to review and approve subdivisions, we need to have guidelines in place. And so these are the mechanisms to do so that we are doing safe, accessible, sustainable, and fiscally responsible development within the city. Next slide, please. So why are we here? Didn't we just look at Chapter 17 revisions? We have recently done revisions to Chapter 17. However, we still have some improvement areas that we have found. Code is a living document always for staff in particular. And so these are some of the updates that we're looking at. Nothing is going to be a drastic change when you see it. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, I'm going to talk a little bit about what is not changing. The intent of how the city approaches development, our support of high quality and sustainable development, our approach to perfecting planning through the process. None of that is changing. And also importantly, dedication standards are not changing yet. And for those of you who haven't read Chapter 17 recently, dedication standards pertain to parks requirements, school requirements, and some of those land components that we see for our subdivisions. We do want to revisit those in the future. However, now is not the time. Those require a real deep dive analysis relative to land valuations and dynamics. So that may be something that we look at concurrently with Chapter 16, depending on how those projects move forward. Next slide, please. Major additions and changes. So one of the components that has kickstarted our revisions for Chapter 17 is that we realize there are a couple of regulations that we utilize that the city has already approved that were not actually connected via our code. So that's one of the purposes for updating Chapter 17 currently. We also need to refine the processes for our provision of securities and the release of those securities. And as a refresher for subdivision regulations, those securities are essentially the financial backing or the promissory note, if you will, that developers may provide as a requirement to subdivide property to ensure that infrastructure improvements will be made within a specified time frame. And in the event that we have a developer who just walks away from a development or something changes drastically, the city then can pull against that security, whether it's a letter of credit, etc. So we're refining the processes for those. We are expanding the application requirements for preliminary plan, final plat, as well as for our final development report submittals, not necessarily because the city itself is changing how we have always worked, but more to reflect how we work in our code. Additionally, we are adding the avigation notice requirements for the FAA. These are already identified in many of our sub-area plans, but again, it wasn't yet carried over into our code. We're clarifying our plat adjustment processes. And finally, we are removing an article from our code. This article is for exemptions. These typically apply to rural areas, unincorporated areas, and to staff's knowledge, there has been no record of an exemption request in the city. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit and start to segue into our discussion of landscaping guidelines, because this, again, was really one of the driving factors for starting to take a deep dive into our subdivision regulations. So currently in our code, we provide processes and improvement requirements for securities for other infrastructure improvements, curb and gutter, roads, sidewalks. We do not require securities currently for landscaping improvements, even though we do require improvements in the right-of-way relative to landscaping. So there's a disconnect and we have a missing piece. So what staff is currently looking at is up top, we have code. We have our rule book. That's where we can always go to, the book that we can rely on if we need to. And then within that, we have improvement agreements as an example. Those are more of the fine print. That's where we have some flexibility to perfect planning within our processes. So between the two, when we combine them as we review these developments, that's what gets us to the end game of safe, fiscally responsible development. And the image on the right is, again, just a quick overview of what we're talking about when we're talking about landscaping in the right-of-way and why we need to have some of these components in place. Next slide, please. So here is a little bit of what staff is starting to visualize as a kind of a carrot and a stick approach. So one of the purposes for code is we need to plan for the worst case scenarios. We want to ensure that if all else fails, we can go to the code and have all of the components in place that we need to ensure, again, that safe, fiscally responsible development for Lone Tree. So with that said, in code as proposed, we do have the option of requiring 115% security when required. That is the same language that we utilize for our infrastructure improvements, curb, gutter, sidewalk. What the city is looking at, and in discussions with some of our partners as well as our referral agencies and some of the comments that we have received, we want to have that in place, worst case scenario, but what we really want to focus on utilizing is the subdivision improvement agreement. And therein, as we review each unique development and each unique subdivision, as we go through those preliminary plans and get that big picture and we sit down with our teams, that's where we really want to structure the timeline and the safety mechanisms in place to make sure that the developer can accomplish their goal and the city can accomplish our goal. So with that said, a couple of the proposals that we have on the table and something that we will continue to refine and that will come to you as a more complete package when you see it on the 18th as proposed, is that, as an example, in the case of landscaping improvement requirements that are established for a single-family detached development, the city might propose that the landscaping within the right-of-way would be required to be completed prior to the issuance of building permits for the remaining 25% of lots per phase. So in other words, the developer could develop 75% of the lots prior to taking on the additional burden of doing the landscaping, and then that would be the trigger at that remaining 25%. In the case of single-family attached developments or commercial developments, there we'll have an SIP associated with that for the lot itself. And then for any landscaping that may be in the right-of-way that might be required, we would offer and propose that the landscaping in the right-of-way would be completed prior to a certificate of occupancy being issued for any buildings that may be in that SIP. And then also as a side note, for park site improvement plans, those would process completely on their own. Whenever they come in, they would not be tied at all to any of the landscaping requirements for a development. And additionally, also something that staff has discussed is, well, if we get to the point, as an example, for single family detached, where a developer has reached that 25% threshold, but maybe for whatever reason they need additional time, but they still would like to convey lots, they then could propose that they would like to put up a security at that time so that they could continue to build out lots in the instance of a weather delay or some other construction delay that might present itself.
So just so I understand this, the security, 150% security, it would only be required under that type of a scenario. If they, go ahead, elaborate for me.
Sure. And it's a little bit difficult because the code is so wordy. Initially, we had the whole section of code in here, but as currently written, code would still provide the option when required that 115% security would need to be put forth by a developer for landscaping improvements as well as the standard infrastructure improvements. However, those two combined can be a fairly significant burden on a developer, so that's why we're looking at splitting those out. That way, Public Works can still process in the same realm that they typically process in, 115% of security with the subdivision improvement agreement for the standard improvements. Landscaping could then be addressed separately via the subdivision improvement agreement under some of these scenarios as proposed, so that we could break it out by tracks.
So is it clear to a developer? I mean, I understand ideally this is all worked out in the developer agreement and we're not referring back to this document, right? Is that a fair statement? That's how we would ideally like to proceed? Is the developer agreement governs all of these types of things?
Yes, so depending on the scale of development, so you would have a preliminary plan and a master development agreement. And then within that, based on phases, is typically where you will find individual infrastructure improvement timelines and securities relative to the phase. And that's where we would propose that these components go, is within each individual subdivision improvement agreement per phase.
I guess what I don't, Lone Tree's got an excellent reputation of being a great place, straightforward, clearly understandable. People know what's expected of them when they come in here, and they know they can plan their time and budget accordingly. So I guess I want to ensure that we are still retaining that. And I guess does council understand?
That was my concern.
Yeah, does council understand? I mean, if I'm the developer coming in to decide if I'm going to do business in Lone Tree, is this clear to me what is going to be required? Or what potentially may be required? And I guess how far into it do I have to get before I understand what's required of me?
Right.
I just want to make it clean and clear for people doing business in our city.
And an alternative would be to approach landscaping securities, because again, this is something that staff has not addressed previously and the city has not tackled previously. So an alternative to code would be to provide a requirement for landscaping improvements relative to a timeline as determined by the subdivision improvement agreement, and the 115% security could be removed entirely relative to landscaping. That is certainly another avenue that we can go.
Is there a standard best practice in the industry?
We have discussed this with our neighbors, and the answer is not really.
Okay.
So if that assists council at all in kind of starting to digest some of that.
I guess
Go ahead.
I'd be interested in hearing which neighbors do what comparatively so that we have an idea. I certainly want to protect us, but I also want to be an appealing place to do business and not send somebody 5 miles down the road to
But we
develop.
don't, or we just don't want to be burdened. We don't want to unnecessarily burden.
Unnecessarily burden.
So
right.
minimize risk and unnecessarily burden. How do we thread that needle? And I'm curious what the reaction from some of our developer partners that we're working with now has been to this.
So to answer that question, we can answer that for you. We did have a meeting with all existing applicants who have something
Right.
in the subdivision review pipeline. That was part of our referral process. That meeting was on July 28th. And this was one of the primary components that they had major questions on relative to code. And so this is something that they proposed some options, staff came back internally, we vetted some things, we talked to Linda a little bit about some options, and this was one approach that staff came up with. So we still have room to add new approaches, to wipe the whole thing to the ground and start over for this particular area. That is why we're here at Study Center.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Go ahead,
based
Jake.
on the meeting on the 28th, were they receptive to this type of arrangement? The other
So
parties?
They haven't seen it yet, I don't think.
Oh, they haven't?
This
Okay.
is based on
This
their
came out.
I
reaction.
thought this was
Staff
their
put-
feedback that we then created this as a result.
it is somewhat collaborative, and yes, so these proposals have been sent to the individuals that we met with on the 28th. So they are in receipt of these proposals, and from everything that staff can interpret at this point, this appears to be a good middle ground. The applicants that we met with would probably like for this to be the only component and to have the reference to security removed entirely in code. So it's more a discussion of, do we have A and B in code? Or do we just have A or just have B in code? Or do we come up with C?
So what land is this surety governing? Is it public right-of-way within?
So therein, that will carry us into the next component. Currently, as written, our landscape design guidelines state that it is for any land in and along 100 feet of land owned by a municipality or a metro district. And actually, if you can go to the next slide, we'll just carry through quickly. So this is how it reads currently. Thank you. These are the areas that it will apply to as it's currently written. We are proposing to make this more clear as well, also based on feedback from some of our partners and applicants.
So graphically, can you show me what, would be helpful for me to have an example with one of our existing subdivisions that you show me then physically where this would govern, and then give an idea of the cost to the developer to do this. In addition to, what is the city's risk in not having this in place? What are we protecting ourselves from by this surety?
So what we are protecting ourselves from, if you remember a couple of slides back, the image of your road, your right of way, your sidewalk, your tree lawn. As developers move forward in their single family developments, some developers would like to have the option to just do sidewalk and road and not put in the tree lawn yet.
Got it.
So hypothetically speaking, we could get to 75% build out or even 100% build out, and we would still have dirt strips in between sidewalk and road. And when you look at the actual lane miles that we're looking at in some of our large developments, and then you add in a 6 foot or an 8 foot, or in some cases even a 12-foot tree lawn, based on the scale of trees proposed, the city could then be left holding the bag there as the code stands, because we have no mechanism in place to protect us.
And what has protected us in the past is the goodwill of the developer we've been working with.
Correct. Correct. But But staff defers to code and the purpose of code, which is, that may not always be the case. So.
And with the scale of the development on the east side of I-25 is a very different scale than what
Correct.
the largest, I think the largest development we've had brought in with Ridgegate on the east side has been hundreds of homes, not thousands of homes. So I appreciate and staff's, yeah.
What we've been trying to kind of compromise, we want to have some guardrails in our code with a lot of flexibility. And
Right.
so looking at, do we, as Roshana mentioned, have that 115% even in there, or do we look at another alternative where we say we will work through an SIA, but specifically say that we will address landscaping in that? We feel that there's a need for something to reference, so we have some authority. Again, God forbid, we have an opportunity with a developer that doesn't go as well as we have in the past, but want to get your feedback, and that's why we wanted to make sure we brought it in study session to give feedback in advance. But we do feel, and in talking with Linda Mitchow as well, that this is a missing component, I guess, if we ultimately want to set some protections for the city.
Right, and so it's again striking that balance between not being overly burdensome but minimizing the city's risk. So one option. So how with that 115% could be phased in as the development phased in. So 25% when they build 25% of that 115 goes into an account. When they build the next 25%, we could phase it that way, right? There's lots of, so I guess, again, I would like to have a better understanding of how other local governments are dealing with this issue. I've been doing a lot of talking. What is everyone else thinking?
Just instead of the 75%.
Well, or 115%, like how, can you go back to the 115% slide?
Yes,
Yeah, there you go. So when required. So what troubles me is that it could be perceived that are we fairly applying the when required? Like if I'm the developer coming in, I want to understand what is going to be required of me. What are my obligations going to be? And when I see that, it makes me nervous. Because
who's going to decide and when?
Right.
Yeah.
So if I get in an argument with not that anybody would ever get in an argument with any of our staff, or potentially, some unreasonable mayor that came along, then they're required to do something that developer A is required and developer B is not, and this that's troubling to me. But I appreciate it potentially relieves burden from the developer, because if we don't require it, right? But what is the fair thing we ask of them to protect us and not overly burden them? And that's what I'm struggling with. Where's that tipping point?
Yeah, you want to be consistent.
Yeah, I'm not, the whole 115 just feels like a big ask, right? Because of all the other asks that come at the same time. So I'd prefer us to have a separate set of criteria like you're defining and see that removed. But that I have limited knowledge of, like really limited knowledge of this kind of stuff. So just like to Jay and Wynn's point about what do
Others
people around us do, and just as long as we look like we're easy to work with, and that I think that's super important to us. So however it's crafted, to make sure that that's true is really what matters to me.
Right. And my tweak of that language would be, we do not want to be burdensome. We want to be fair.
Right.
And we think it's reasonable to ask for protections for the city, but we do not want to overly burden someone coming in trying to do business in our community. So helping us in that. Yeah, Mike.
I appreciate the dialogue back and forth, and I think fairness is certainly what we want to do, and protection. As we've talked to people that are interested in developing the area and with our neighbors, I don't understand the significance of 115%. It just seems like a strange number. any dialogue on why it's 115 versus 100%? Like, what does that mean?
So as to the specific 115, that would be more of a question that I would pivot to Public Works, and we can certainly provide you with the specifics on that when we bring this back to you for formal consideration.
So it's consistent, that's the point. It's
Right.
consistent, so that's what we, Mike, so
It
that's
is.
what we asked, that's the Public Works
Perfect.
surety, that,
Yeah.
and that is fairly well established, I think,
Mhm.
in the industry.
For
So,
inflation, essentially.
yep. But that is one of the other, so there's consistency there. Follow up on that, Mike?
No, I understand the consistency issue with Public Works. It just seems like a strange number to begin with if I were a developer. I'm not sure I understand the significance, but that might be a side issue for me to try to understand with Public Works sometime one-on-one.
Okay. So is there a recommendation, like, I don't think council is comfortable with where it is now. So this one we want to revisit. Let's move on and see if there's any others we'd like to revisit as well.
Sure, absolutely. And when we bring this back to you, we will have more visuals for you. That was difficult for us to provide without straying into the waters of an application that will be before you in the future. So we'll pull some from neighboring areas and take a look at that.
Or even, I think it'd be fine to use an existing development and then just say, this is what we would be talking about.
Right.
Use one of our more recent past
Sure.
past projects, which I think makes it more real to us.
Okay.
Okay,
We will do
so-
that, and we will broaden our net as well for the comparisons. We'll go to Arapahoe and Jefferson also. All right.
So, but before you move on, I want to ask this question. So when I walk over in the Taos area by those tennis courts, there are these old electrical boxes from what development would have been there that isn't. So what we're trying to do is prevent things like that from happening on the east side of I-25. So I think that's a very important thing to do, because when we walk through there and this beautiful open space that we have, we look at those and go, what in the heck?
Right.
And how was this allowed to happen, and how has it been allowed to continue? So we want to do this. So I don't want to
Right.
make, so this is important. This is important, but again, we want to understand how we're doing it and not being overly burdensome in doing it. So
We don't want zombie land.
no zombie land.
No zombie land.
Duly noted. We will proceed. All right, next slide, please. And you can go to the next slide after that. Perfect. Thank you. All right, so moving into our landscape design guidelines, you saw the definition as it currently stands. This is how we are proposing to rewrite the application guidelines. And again, the primary purpose for rewriting these guidelines is twofold. First, so that we can add in an option to allow staff with developers to identify large gateway entrances and tracts to be set aside specifically, so that we are very clear as to which components within a development will need to adhere to the landscape design guidelines. Following that, everything will be a very strict definition of right-of-way. So we have just expanded and added the entryway component, and then we have added Metropolitan District Homeowners Association or private party or private entity due to the varying scales of maintenance authority that may present themselves. The one item that is still in discussion, because referral period closed today, so we may still receive additional referral comments, the adoption date. Currently, we are still trying to determine if the new adoption date will be the date that council adopts these currently proposed recommendations, or if we will adhere to the previously adopted date. So that remains to be seen. Next slide, please. So why revise the landscape guidelines? Again, to expand the areas of applicability, to clarify standards for traffic and pedestrian safety. And one of the other key components for revising these guidelines is to very clearly identify which are standards and which are guidelines similar to our design guidelines for the city. That was an area that we needed to improve a little bit so that we are very clear to our developers which are requirements. and then to just clarify the city's application processes. Next slide, please. Major additions and changes. Again, area of application, standards versus guidelines, some additional standards and guidelines added specifically to prevent future maintenance issues and to preserve pedestrian and traffic safety, and then to clarify the application process. Next slide, please. All right, here we are at next steps. So the public notice was published on July 23rd for the reading of Chapter 17. The public hearing is set for August 18th. As proposed, the first reading is August 18th. That certainly is all dependent on how City Council directs staff. And the resolution is currently proposed for consideration for August 18th as well for the landscape design guidelines. And then the second reading of the ordinance for Chapter 17 is proposed for September 1st, but staff will flex as needed.
Okay, so I think the biggest concern is with the security associated with the right-of-way landscaping.
Right.
I think we need to see it in study session on the 18th, and assuming we're satisfied, I don't see a reason to not leave it on, and we can always pull it off the agenda if our questions aren't answered. Is council comfortable with that approach?
Yep.
And, okay, so I think we're good. I think this is really helpful. I think it's great. I think we have questions, and I think we have every confidence you will bring back good answers.
If you didn't have questions, we would be concerned.
Yeah, exactly,
Thank you.
exactly. All right, wonderful, thank you. All right, next on our agenda is resuming Link on Demand transit service, the proposed implementation plan, and Justin Schmitz is here. Justin.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. We are here tonight to provide a few updates on some public works items, and we're going to be starting today with really some concepts to resume our very popular Link on Demand transit service. We're going to give a little bit of background and then highlight some of the safety features that we have implemented or would like to implement in the system, as well as get some feedback about potential options to implement this and some of the budget impacts that that would have. So next slide. So if everybody remembers, Link on Demand Transit really started in January 2019. Before that, it was really a fixed route service. It provided great service into our business community to tie into the station at Lincoln Station. As we opened up the Southeast Rail Extension, we were able to switch it to an on-demand system. We were able to provide over 50,000 rides through February of 2020. Again, a very successful system that continues to get questions from all kinds of communities about how we're able to pull this off. Obviously, post-February 2020, we started to see a lot of changes. Ridership numbers began dropping starting that week of March 2nd. And we did continue to see those dropping as we monitored it and for the safety of the community. And as we tried to assess the kind of impact that COVID-19 would have in our community, we did suspend that service on March 16, 2020, ironically, my birthday. So that was kind of a tough day. So I want to highlight a few of the things that we have been looking at. These are things that Dan Rain, who's on the line today and can answer any questions that you have about any of these details, has been doing a great job working with other communities and with our vendor, as well as other people on what are some of these things RTD's been doing and other transit agencies have been doing to keep their operators safe and the community safe. So when we look at it, one of the things we'd be implementing is the installation of a clear barrier to enclose the driver, reducing contact between the drivers and patrons. Very similar to what you see at grocery stores and most other business places today. Also recommending a 50% reduction in the vehicle passenger seat. That would increase separation from the driver and amongst the patrons. Typically, when the Link was operating, most of the time, the shuttle would be about 50% full or less, unless there was a big family or something that joined. So we believe that this would still operate effectively within the system and still serve the needs of the community. Also, we'd be doing permanent hand sanitizer dispensers adjacent to the passenger entry and exit door. Next. A few other things that have been recommended, trying to keep the windows open and your HVAC ventilation increased during the warm weather days to promote air circulation. Passenger to wear face coverings when inside the shuttle. Drivers will continue to wear gloves, masks, eye protection to assist patrons requiring ADA assistance. And all high contact surfaces are disinfected 3 times each day. So again, that was sort of the shuttle changes. The other big key that we've been noticing in the community as well as in the transit world is how do you get that information to the patrons or people using the service? The advantage we have with Link is people have to request the service on the app. That actually gives us a way to communicate directly with those community members that are using it. And so what we would be doing is creating an in-app patron checklist to be COVID symptom-free upon riding a ride on the Link. So again, they would have to create, the same things you're answering in every facility that you go in or business, that you haven't had contact, that you're not sick, and you'd have to do that when you book your ride. In addition, there'll be an explanation of all the new practices on board the shuttles, the sanitizer, the reduced seating, the face coverings, the other safety things that have been implemented. And there'd also be a notification of the transit stops. So sort of guiding patrons to find locations that maybe, if they didn't want to have to drive into some of these businesses, they could kind of pick them up right adjacent to it. And that information would be increased in the way to get that information out to patrons. A few other things, also working with VIA, we'd be able to sort of increase that social distance by limiting the number of riders that can book a ride. So again, if you were to try to book more capacity on that shuttle than was allowed, there's only 2 more seats on that reduced capacity shuttle, it would tell you to hold and you'd get picked up on the next one. And for shorter distance trips, a walking time would be displayed to the vehicle, sort of encouraging a walk and reducing that transit demand to adjacent destinations. So one example, Charles Schwab campus, it may say we can pick you up, but if you want to walk to Skyridge Station, it would be this time frame. This is something they've been implementing in other cities to try to balance out that usage. And especially during the colder weather months, as we get towards that, that would start to increase again, that ridership. And the VIA phone application would also allow the city to utilize the patron database to contact patrons in the event of any sickness or anything else that would be communicated out to the community. So all that data is available and could be then communicated out. We hope and don't anticipate I need that, but it is there in the event it would have to be. And I think that's a critical piece of that technology as well. Next slide. So again, that was sort of the safety features, what our app can do to implement a lot of those safety features. And what we wanted to do was present really 3 different scenarios that the staff has been looking into. We believe all of these, as with everything, have pros and cons, but really wanted to get some feedback about these scenarios. So scenario, one thing I wanted to highlight, and I'll start at the bottom and then go back up, but we did delay some of our approved budget for this, obviously with the suspension of the service. Currently, there is an allowable budget of $161,000 in 28. So what that is the actual budget that is left within our 2020. So just so you get comparison as you look at the numbers that I'm going to present. So scenario 1, we would basically maintain the prior service of 2 full-time vehicles. So the service that existed in February of 2020. You can see that would be a cost of $167,000. I do like to highlight there is a partnership with Denver South that does reimburse us for a piece of that, so you can see the breakdown on the screen. A second scenario would be to only have 1 full-time vehicle and then 1 part-time vehicle that would be used really during peak periods. This would, we believe, meet the demand that we would expect to see, especially with the relaunch of the service. And what that would do is there'd be 1 time full vehicle, and then when we got to those peak periods, and those peak periods might adjust as we see data, and we'd have to kind of work to see exactly what that is with VIA and with our contractor. We'd make that adjustment. Again, you can see the cost there would save us about $40,000 for the remainder of 2020. And the cost breakdown is shown on that. We did want to look at another scenario, scenario 3. What if we just had 1 full-time vehicle? You can see the cost breakdown of that one. That we propose would cost around $85,000 total for the remainder of 2020. The one challenge with that is we do believe that certainly during certain periods of the day, the service level would be reduced quite a bit during those peak periods. I think any of these scenarios are workable, but we did want to kind of look at those costs and benefits from that scenario. I'm going to stop here and pause with any questions about any of those 3 scenarios or any of the stuff that I had talked about before, and then I have 1 or 2 more slides after.
Okay, questions? Yes, Wynn.
I know we had talked about replacing these vehicles with smaller, sleeker, whatever, but in light of 50% capacity, are we still able to operate these vehicles?
Dan Rain, if you're online, would you mind answering that question for us? Because he's been working exactly with the contractor on that.
And the follow-up to that is how many people are accommodated at 50%?
Yep.
Right.
Dan, if you're available, would you answer that question?
Hey, good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Yes, what we have done is we've negotiated with our provider, WPM. They're going to repurpose a couple of Ford Transit vans that are actually larger than what we were, the vehicle we were proposing earlier this year. Those vehicles will have up to a 15-person capacity. With the new ADA equipment, might be reduced to 12. So at 50%, that would still be 6 people per vehicle. And when we were running really well, we were at just over 9 people per hour per vehicle. So I feel like the new vehicles will be able to accommodate them, but they will be black Ford Transit vans with a slight bit of different branding.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I did.
Jay?
Yeah, my only concern is I'm just wondering demand, what that will really look like. And do we have any indication when Schwab will actually be going back to on-campus?
Yeah, I think we're looking at a January date for a really majority of our large employers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as a follow-up to Jay's question is how flexible can we be? I get before you answer that. So under scenario 2, which is the recommended action, what would the service hours be and how could we adjust them if we weren't seeing the demand?
Very good question. I think, that is one thing we did want to highlight is certainly, the recommendation from staff is we would potentially start with a scenario 2 with that one full-time vehicle and peak period. We would be able to adjust, we believe, some of that peak period based on what the demand is that we're seeing because, we'd love to make a guess of what people are going to use when we relaunch this. But if I said exactly, it wouldn't be accurate because there's so much unknown a little bit. We have got a lot of, requests in from people asking when are we starting, and we've answered those. And most people we've talked to have said until the winter months, they can kind of get around it. There's more concern once the weather turns and trying to use that service. And so my main point is, I think, yes, scenario 2 we would start with, but we would constantly be able to look at adjustments and flexing. And we may, if we see demand is not that high, we may start going more towards a scenario 3, right, where that peak period isn't ever seen and maybe that vehicle isn't needed. So these would kind of be the maximum cost we would expect. And as we monitor the situation, we don't, would we actually get to those levels? And I believe we'd have to continually kind of flex it as we proceed down the year. And VIA has all that data, which is the advantage we have. We can constantly get that data and see what's happening. So that's really the kind of watching game we're going to have to do a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
When?
I had one follow-up with these repurposed transit vans. Is there a place for a bicycle to?
Dan, I'm going to kick it on back to you again.
Yes, all the vehicles are equipped with a bicycle rack with the capacity of carrying 2 bicycles at any time.
Okay.
Kath, do you have anything?
No, I mean, super concerned about the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so what kind of flexibility, what are we committing to when we commit to one of these solutions? What's the time frame in which we're committed under that? Is it a year? What is the?
Great. So at least the proposals that I'm sharing on the screen, this would just be for the remainder of 2020. I do believe sort of a ongoing discussion about the service into 2021 and beyond is something that we would have to continue to have. This would just be to relaunch within 2020. And, we were mindful of sort of the remainder of the approved budget as our really top limit and making sure none of these went over that. And as you can see, all the options do bring us under, 50 or 60,000 under that within the rest of just this year.
Yeah.
Right, but.
And just knowing that we're cutting so many services because we have to right now,
Yes.
that this one feels like it's a nice to have, not a must have. And so I wouldn't be in favor of scenario 1, just because it's just that kind of money, and a 2-car service feels like more than what we can probably do for the rest of the year. So scenario 2 or 3 is more in line with what I would feel comfortable with from a monetary perspective.
And I think what I'm hearing from council is the need for flexibility in the service hours, the term of the contract, and kind of the number of the vehicles. And there's a part of me that wonders why we wouldn't start with scenario 3 and see what demand is, and then bring in the peak vehicle, or what that's going to cost us to have the flexibility to do that. But to me, those the flexibility around those 3 hours, issues, the service hours, the number of vehicles, and the term of the contract are what we need a little more clarity from staff on. And frankly, just because we have that 161,000, I think Kathy's point is very well taken. We don't necessarily want to spend it because we don't know what next year is going to look like for us. I think I'm hearing from council that if there is demand, we want to provide this service, but we don't want a vehicle sitting idly by, and we want to be able to turn it on and off whenever we want to. So I don't, those are, that's a tough contract to negotiate there, Justin. So, you and Dan, that I think is the input from council. I want to give Councilmember Anderson an opportunity to add some thoughts. Mike, anything else that we have not addressed that you would like to bring up?
Not really additionally, but I'm kind of sitting in the same position that you and Kath are. I would be inclined to start with option 3 and see what the demand is and hope that or ask the staff to put flexibility in the contract that we could ramp it up if we had sufficient demand to justify that. Certainly one of the things that we've seen in COVID is that even when restrictions are lifted, people are still hesitant to go out and do the things they used to do. So it just feels better to me to be at scenario 3 as a service to the community and ramp up if we see the demand requires it.
Or maybe we just provide peak service. Maybe we just provide service during peak times. I mean, if we're not seeing, four people per vehicle hour, we don't offer the service. So it's a lot of question marks, and I think that's the challenge with COVID. We have continued question marks. So I think our challenge to staff is going to be how flexible can we be with our contractor. To begin, I think we're interested in providing some level of service. Maybe we start scenario 3 at just peak, what we had seen at peak service, get the feedback from the community. We want to see it at other times. We don't have the data from VIA to see, I don't have the data from VIA to see when it was being used. So that I would be curious to see how that data could guide establishment of a service hour and a service model at the beginning. So I don't think it's kind of an all or nothing. I'm interested in exploring a peak hour service only. If people, or a reduction in hours. I mean, we don't have to keep the same hours that we had prior to COVID because frankly, I don't think the demand is going to be there, Justin.
Yeah, and I think, to answer those, I do believe that the demand that we're going to see is, an unknown. And so creating flexibility, we do want to make sure that our contractor can hire drivers and have a consistency of some schedule, right? So, but I do, we can certainly take back and work with VIA, work with our contractor and the team and the staff to find out, what could something look like between scenario 3 and 2, or some options that would
to scale up or
we're all on the
scale.
same page about wanting to provide a service, but we want to provide a service that meets the need of the community, right? Not something else. And so how do we try to find that line? It's not perfect. So, and we do have to at least have the contract be able to meet their service level.
Exactly. They need to, again, we understand their issues. They need to understand ours, and how do we find a place to meet in the middle? That I think scalable, flexible is key for that. So have you gotten enough feedback from us to go back for another round at this?
Yes.
I have one more question. Like the Arts Center did a survey of people who are patrons, could we do a survey and say, we're considering bringing this back? What hours would you use it, and select all? Would you use it?
I'd love Jeff to reach out to the business community as well to find out when they think they're going to be having some kind of return to staffing levels, in-office staffing levels. I think that's a part of it. So if you could explore what VIA could do to reach out to past customers, and then so past customers from VIA, and then also the business community to understand how they're needing to get workers to and from, or patrons to and from.
That's a great idea.
There. So, okay. All right.
All right.
Anything else, Mike? Last bite at this apple, Justin, Kath? Good. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. That was
All right.
very helpful.
Thanks, Justin. All right, moving on to our citywide pavement and signage assessment. Jana is here with us. Is she here with us?
Yep, I'm remote. Good evening, Mayor and council members.
Oh.
Can everybody see me and hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry. My notes indicated that you would be here in person, and I didn't see you in this room. So that was the
No.
confusion, Jana. So
I'm-
please go ahead.
I'm reporting live from my basement.
The slides are actually here for another presentation. So we
Did I skip somebody?
Oh,
Oh, Justin, I apologize, Jana. Sorry.
no, I'll go back.
Just I saw your name and just
Like-
scratched it up again.
Justin's already up here.
Jana, Justin is hugging your time, so just hang on 1 minute for me. All right. Can you give us an update, Justin, on the city transportation grant applications and opportunities? I think I just.
Well, I was already here, yeah, so.
Yeah.
So the second update, and I wanted to provide a quick update on really some of the grants and different funding opportunities that the city has been working on recently and the ones we're currently in process of. There's a lot of great work that the team's been working on, specifically Dan Rain again, who's available to answer questions as we go through this. So I want to start just quickly with, the city of Lone Tree has always been successful in competing and obtaining funding from regional sources through various programs. John Cotton was very successful at it. The city has always been successful. We have a light rail extension. There's plenty of examples of how successful it's been. And this strong success has continued with the transition of the Public Works Department to an internal department. Staff continues to work to find potential grant opportunities wherever we can that are consistent with the big ideas of the city of Lone Tree. We get them all the time, and we only go after certain ones. So we're going to talk about a few tonight, but we're not going after everyone. We're really going after ones that are consistent with what we believe the city of Lone Tree needs and will meet the needs of our community. So just to highlight a few, many of these we've already talked about, and a few of them are newer. Through DRCOG, and I tried to highlight on the top of these which the funding came from because it gets a little confusing, but so part of our 2020 to 2023 transportation improvement program through DRCOG, we did receive federal funding for 2 projects as part of the Douglas County subregion. That is a C470 grade separated trail over Acres Green Drive. That's $2 million of federal funding that is coming to both the county and the city of Lone Tree. And then the second project is the I-25 Lincoln Traffic and Mobility Improvement Study. So that is really looking at that interchange complex. We talked about this as part of the Transportation Master Plan and some other projects. That is $1.25 million, again, coming into the city. Now, these are a little further out. These are in the years 2022, 2023. So they're near the end of the period. But again, showed success competing on a regional scale, trying to get these projects, and also had the support of Douglas County. So I want to make sure we highlight that. Okay, next one. Another opportunity that the city has worked with, this one is through CDOT. So every sort of 3-year cycle, CDOT works on what they call their Highway Safety Improvement Program. And basically this funding is focused on the CDOT highway system, but it can also be applied to major regional arterials as well. When I was in the city of Denver, we applied it to a few regional corridors and they accepted it, and CDOT would fund those. So we applied kind of the same philosophy down here in the city of Lone Tree, and we applied for this funding for the first time. And we were successful in getting 2 intersections funded through the state. One would be to reconstruct County Line Road and Acres Green Drive signal. That is the current one of our span wires, and we've talked a lot about trying to get those span wires along County Line reconstructed. We were planning to initially do that all on our own, but we worked with CDOT and were awarded $487,000 through that process to support us in that construction and reconstruction of that signal. In addition, Parkway Drive and Acres Green has been a long-standing sort of challenge. That's the one just north of C470 if you're on Acres Green that accesses a lot of our retail community in there and has the trail access. So we've also worked with them to be awarded $645,000 to construct a signal at that intersection in coordination with the bridge project. So again, a lot of success. We were competing against very large cities with very large intersections, and so I think it was a successful process to go through. And even our conversation with CDOT, they were excited about seeing applications coming and trying to work with us on this. The next one, this one's DRCOG again. These are called our Regional Transportation Operations and Technology funding. So try to remember that multiple times. But really, this funding is separated really for what it talks about, right? Operations and technology of the traffic system. So a lot of this goes to build conduit or to build new signal technology, to put in new technologies. And so the city of Lone Tree, Dan Rain and Steve Fletcher did a great job pulling this application together. And we applied for this funding as well. And we just recently found out that we were recommended for approval to the DRCOG board. This has not been approved yet by the board. It's going.
Wayne's going to carry that for us.
So, I'm hopeful we have a supporter here. But certainly what we proposed was an installation of the adaptive signal technology on Ridgegate Parkway from Cabela to Peoria. Now, what that would be is to complete the rest of the investment that the city made along Yosemite and connect it into our new roadway widening project and the freeway. And that was, again, we recommended to get $200,000, which covers the mass majority of that project. And this would be funded again from DRCOG and federal funds. Few more. We're very busy right now. Obviously,
you're busy asking for money. I like that, Justin.
Yeah, right.
It's working for me. Good work. Working for me.
And I think it is a very exciting. I have the old logo up here because I was having a hard time finding the new one. So
yeah,
this is Denver South's, TMA. So we work with SpyMed to help fund really capital projects and transportation improvements along the I-25 corridor. That's historically always been a very great partnership. And we're currently working on these 5 applications with them currently. I'm just going to highlight them real quick. Again, we talked about I-25 in Lincoln, the study with CDOT. We've actually asked SpyMed to come in and help with our local match. So obviously all these projects have a match that the local governments have to have with the state and federal government. But you can get partnerships from other people to help your match. And this is exactly what we're asking. So we're asking SpyMed to come in and really help us fund the local match part of that project to reduce our future obligation. The second project, same thing, Ridgegate Parkway Adaptive Signals. We're asking for them to help with the local match for that project. Again, reducing any future cost to the city of Lone Tree by having a partner to come to the table with us. The 3 other ones on there, there's also a study we've looked at. This is out there 4 years out in the future somewhere. I'm really looking at, could we do some bikeway improvements along Ridgegate Parkway? Once we have the new section completed, we're going to have bike lanes on Sky Ridge Avenue, Ridgegate Parkway, and then we're going to have a new facility on the other side of I-25, and how do we connect those? Again, that's sort of a long-term study we looked at. 2 other ones, Lincoln Avenue uninterrupted power source upgrade. Anyone who's driven, we've had some power issues on Lincoln and our signals the last few years. This would help us to mitigate that and to really make us have a better power system where those signals would not go out nearly as often. And the last one, some technologies to put some new closed circuit televisions in the system. So these are all processes that we're working through, and these are still in that process with SpyMed of looking for funding. And the 2 ones we're currently working on that may be of interest. So CDOT put out some interesting grants as part of this process and in response, I believe, to some of the impacts that communities are seeing right now. So one is revitalizing main streets. That grant is really trying to make street closures. I was up in Salida last week, and they had a pretty, on their F Street that closed down some blocks and had 3. So concepts like that, right? How do you put in these better places for people to congregate and experience the businesses around them? So we have been working, you can see the concept up on the slide there. That is something we're looking at. That's a concept, but something like that at Monk and Mongoose. So it would be actually on sort of around the intersection there on Commonwealth. They have tables up there right now, and we've actually been working with them to figure out a way we can make this more creative space and a more attractive space for people to congregate.
And allow social distancing, allow people to patronize the business. And I think I think there's been some very creative use of main streets in other communities to bring the restaurants out into the street to allow for greater service area. And I think it's being encouraged. So I think this is and having had a meeting at Monk and Mongoose yesterday, there was not a table to be had. We ended up on a bench across the street. So,
and that's the concept.
6 feet apart.
Yep. How do you use some of the right of way and space to create more opportunity for the businesses to expand? And I think we have a great partner with both Rampart Range and with for the maintenance side, as well as having the coffee shop there to support us with Monk and Mongoose. So this is one we're wrapping up this week, and we plan to submit this week. So we're excited about the competitiveness of that project as we move forward. And then the last one, there's a Safer Main Streets initiative. Again, this is really a long process of DRCOG and CDOT going through a Vision Zero effort and how do they enhance safety in the network in the region, right? Not individual cities, but in the DRCOG region, and how do we make safer streets for everyone? And so we're looking at some projects with the county. One is trying to figure out, is there some way we could connect, the C470 trail goes back behind Costco and all those areas. Is there a way we can connect that in somehow to provide more mobility access into the Park Meadows Retail Resort? And then we're also looking at potentially the funding or implementation of some of our rapid rectangular flashing beacons we've discussed. So again, trying to find money from other sources to really meet the needs of our community. So these are also 2 projects that we currently have in process to submit. I talked a lot there. So final summary, and then the questions. We want to highlight just really, if you look at this, and for a city the size of the city of Lone Tree to be competing in a lot of these regionals and to bring in funding, it's something I think is a great thing for the city and shows how, we've talked before about punching above our weight, and this is where we're trying to do it. So currently we've been awarded $4,582,000 of federal money, state money to support these initiatives, and the potential future funding would potentially be $855,000 plus. Now, again, that's a lot of that SPI-Med and other things that you saw in the process. So I know we've presented some of that information quickly. That's a lot, but we did just want to highlight some of the great work that the team has been doing and some of the success stories we've seen this year. Any questions?
I think it's great work, and kudos to you and the team for getting that together. Questions from council? Or
No, great job.
You went through it quickly, and we don't want to minimize it. It's excellent work, and I think really adding to value that we bring to the residents in the city of Lone Tree. So thank you for that. Mike, do you have any questions?
No questions. Appreciate all the hard work that people have done to get it to this point. I think it's useful to keep council informed about this so that as we interact with people in the community, we can reinforce our interest in these opportunities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Jess.
I just want to highlight, I forgot one thing.
Yeah.
Jana Krell, who's coming on next, who I kicked off.
Yeah.
She was our champion to get the signal funding. So she was the one who went through the whole application and worked to get it done. So
yay, Jana.
She did a great job coming in right away. And
thank you.
So wanted to make sure I highlight that before she jumps on. So.
All right, thanks, Joe. And thanks to Dan, who joined us remotely as well. So, and I think we've got another, Public Works who's taken over this meeting. You got the whole team. All right, Jana, live from your basement. Again, round 2.
Thank you, guys. I won't make this take too long. So good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here today to go over the 2020 Transportation Asset Data Collection Project that was performed this spring and give you guys an overview of the project. Next slide. Thank you. So every 3 years, the Public Works Department assesses the condition of all of its roadways, and this is done through the use of a consultant selected by the standard RFP process. And in addition, this year, we also inventoried all of the city-owned street signs as just a one-time inventory because we hadn't previously collected that data before. Next. So what we're looking for in this data collection for the road is we're looking for roughness, rutting, faulting, and cracking. Next slide. And how this is collected is through this fancy van with mobile LiDAR on top, 3D pavement imagery, and a pavement profiler in the bottom. And this van drives all of the city's streets, recording all of this data for us. Next slide. And then in regards to the sign evaluation, what we were looking for was the location, the type of sign, and the condition of each of them. Next slide. How this was collected was similarly with the vehicle driving the city streets, but this one was done with a simple GoPro camera mounted to the dash, and photos were taken of each of the signs as they drove along. And the deliverable for the roadway evaluation was a pavement condition index And this is a numeric index between 0 and 100, which is used to indicate the general condition of the pavement section. And a PCI is widely used as an asset management, and many municipalities use it to measure the performance of their roads. So this was the deliverable that we received from the consultants in regards to the roadway. That data is then converted into the map that you'll see on the right. So this map shows a variety of colors that reflect the PCIs for each of the roads. So we've got 2020 on the right side, and I've put 2017 on the left just as a comparison. And so what you can just kind of take an overall view from here is that you see, the colors. I want to go over the colors. Sorry about that. The dark green represents good, light green satisfactory, yellow fair, pink poor, and red very poor. And so when you look at the 2017 in comparison, you see a lot of yellows. And in the 2020 version, those yellows have gone to green, which is great. And the reason for this is because the current mill and overlay program that the city has in place is really doing a good job of maintaining the city streets and getting those that are in fair shape back into good. So next. I'm a very visual person, so I put this information into these two pie charts by percentages of each of the categories. And so on the right for the 2020, you can see that 81% of the city streets are satisfactory or above. In 2017, that was only 61%. So just to reiterate, we're reducing the very poor and poor roadways consistently, which is really great for the city. Next. So zooming into Lincoln Avenue, which was ideally supposed to be paved this year, but we know it no longer will be. But it in 2017 was shown as yellow fair. Fast forward to 2020, we now see segments of it that are pink for poor and red for very poor, which is to be expected. But this is just an example of 3 years of a very busy road with no mill and overlay. So next slide. So the reason I bring this up is because in this graph you can see pavement goes from good to fair over X number of years. Then beyond fair to failing, that amount of time reduces drastically and the deterioration increases. And the reason this is really important is because once our roadways get into that poor and very poor category, it can be 4 times as expensive to replace failed pavement as opposed to milling and overlaying pavement when it's still in a condition we can work with. Next. So beyond just Lincoln, which is circled here in red, some of the other roads that we're looking at milling and overlaying for the next 3 years, we've got the Park Meadows Resort area up north. We have Lincoln east of I-25. We also have Park Meadows Drive just north of Lincoln. And then we also have quite a few residential areas that we are going to look into for the next few years, including Crooked Stick, which is also still circled here in red. Now switching gears to the sign data that we collected, what you can see here is that that the consultants marked each of the signs that that were collected, and each of these pins represent a sign panel. And from the next slide, so in conclusion, we have a hearty amount of signs, sorry. And in this slide, we found out that we had 4,100 sign panels owned by the city of Lone Tree. And how that's possible is that most sign posts have more than one sign panel, which you can see in the photograph at the top. And a signalized intersection has on average 15 sign panels. So that's how we get to this big number of 4,100 city-owned signs. So next. And why did we do this? Why did we need this information? Well, in 2015, the Manual of Traffic Control Devices started to mandate the use of retroreflective signage. And then 3 years later, the Federal Highway Administration required municipalities to put programs in place to implement this adjustment. Next. And what we observed is that of all 4,100 signs, all were good or average condition, which is good to hear. And by documenting every sign that the city owns, a program can be implemented to determine the best plan of action for getting these existing signs up to date. And lastly, we also took this information and we input it into the city's asset tracking software, Cartograph. And this is for future maintenance purposes as signs need to be replaced just in general from being hit by cars or just from age or getting crooked. So, so we also input that information into there. Next slide. So I know that was a lot of information, but we were really excited to collect that data this spring. And we are planning to use it just to keep our infrastructure in good shape and help us to make healthy decisions for the city. And I know that's a lot, but if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to expand on anything if you do.
Shanna, what you don't know about this council is we are always excited about that pavement process, and it is one of the things. Ask Kristen. I've been saying, when are we going to find out? When are we going to find out?
I was excited too, Mayor.
Yeah, no, and we're excited about how we can use that data to make the good and difficult, challenging budget decisions we're going to have to make next year.
Yes.
So we, unless anybody has a burning question other than to say thank you, we are running into a late time. So, and I'm not kidding you, Jana, we live for that stuff. Everybody's got the biggest smiles on their faces around here.
Okay, good. 81% good roads.
Yeah, and it will be used to inform our decisions. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
With that, we're going to thanks. With that, we're going to move on to the County Line Road Storm Pipelining Project with SEMSWA, and Jacob is here to present. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. We'll make this quick since I know I'm the anchor here, but we wanted to give you an update on a project at County Line Road working with SEMSWA. So slide, please. So what happened on June 17th of this year?
That was not good pavement management, asset management right there,
no,
Jacob. Not good.
We'd like to avoid this.
Yes, this is what we don't want to happen.
Yes,
Was this the pink road?
Yeah, there isn't even a color. It's ultraviolet.
Yeah. It's not even worthy of a color.
Yeah.
But this did happen. This happened on
Not
the
in Lone
westbound
Tree.
side of County Line Road in Centennial's.
Yeah, let's make clarify.
Yes. So that's the good news for the city of Lone Tree. The concerning news for the city of Lone Tree is it's caused by a pipe under the road that is also under the eastbound lanes, which is in the city of Centennial. So
is in the city of Lone Tree.
Yes.
I'm
Or
confusing
Lone Tree. Yes. Sorry. Yes. And Advance 1, yeah. So you can see that this small pothole turned into a pretty big repair that the city of Centennial had to deal with. What you're looking at there is about 1.5 lanes of patch that they had to do after they fixed the pipe and filled it back up, and so now they've got to deal with that. Slide, please. So under the inspection, though, you can see what the inside of the pipe looked like. This is actually the Lone Tree side of the pipe, and you can see the corrosion starting on the bottom of the pipe there. That is ultimately what led to the failure on the westbound side. So we got a sneak peek of what might happen on our side. So we want to get council's update on taking some action. So go ahead and slide. Just aerial showing you where it actually happened. The sinkholes there, the green square. The orange line across the road is the old pipe, the pipe in question for this project. And then you can see on the south side, that's the new pipe that was put in with the intersection project, I believe a few years ago. With the IGA with Centennial, the blue part here is what Centennial's responsibility is, and everything south of that would be the city of Lone Tree's responsibility. Okay. So SEMSWA obviously does want to move forward quickly with the project. They want to line the pipe. That's the most cost-effective and quickest way to address this issue. It does require minimal traffic control, and the city of Lone Tree now has an opportunity to partner with them, get economy of scale, get the Lone Tree side lined at the same time, and avoid a potential roadway hazard and issue in the future. So in situ form is the product that they're looking to go with, and if the city of Lone Tree were to piggyback on this, we would obviously pay for our portion of the pipe as well. So slide. So here's a quick animation of what it looks like, the actual product and the lining process. So we'll see if we can get this video to play here.
In situ form's flagship Cured in Place Pipe Technology, or CIPP, is a pipe within a pipe, installed without digging. Resin-saturated, coated felt tubing is inverted or pulled into the existing pipe. Hot water or steam is then circulated throughout the tubing, curing the resin and forming a tight-fitting, jointless, corrosion-resistant pipe within a pipe. Service laterals are then restored using a robotically controlled cutting device. Finally, the rehabilitated pipe is fully inspected by closed-circuit TV. Insituform's trenchless technology is the world's most trusted pipe rehabilitation solution.
So that gives you a quick overview of what the process is and what the end product is. The city has partnered with SEMSWA on another project like this previously, and it's worked really well too. And I know SEMSWA does use this in other parts of their jurisdiction with older pipe as well. So when we get down to brass tacks, this project will cost $97,589. Lone Tree's portion which would include half of the miscellaneous cost, just under $16,000, and 88 feet of 36-inch pipelining at $35,200. Puts Lone Tree at $51,194.50. And slide. Next slide. Oh.
That was it. The one, go back.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay. So the two budget items that staff has found that we can use since this was an unexpected expense was the stormwater maintenance line item that had $30,000 in it. It was reduced as part of the budget reductions. However, the inlet deck replacement that was anticipated with that wouldn't be feasible necessarily with $30,000 and not having a concrete contractor in the city this year. So that was part of the funds, and then the street lighting line item is tracking about 90% of its budget. So we're comfortable with pulling the rest of the funds from that item and using those funds to partner with SEMSWA. And that is it for me now. So any questions you have?
Other than when are you going to get it done? No.
Well, they are planning on starting within the next couple of weeks, actually.
Great.
So very soon.
Joe, I think, again, we appreciate the partnership with SEMSWA. We appreciate the good work that you've done bringing it to us. And I don't think anybody has any question about the need. And I'm glad there are some budgeted line items that we can use to address this.
Yes.
So, and you know, the theme for Public Works is keep on keeping on partnering. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And with that concludes the last presentation. We've got a short recess before the beginning of our regular council meeting at 7 p.m. So Jacob, thank you very much. And we are going to take our dinner break. Oh yeah, thank you. Are there questions on our consent agenda, which, as we recall, does include our claims, minutes, and also the appointment of Mike Schumacher to our Lone Tree Art Center Fund.
No questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kath. Okay, we are now on our dinner break, and we will rejoin at 7 p.m. for our council meeting. Thanks, everybody, and thanks for that. It was a very lengthy study session, but I think really good info. It was the Public Works Hour.